Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have already proven their incompetence and poor leadership during the Los Angeles wildfires. Now, as we experience rampant lawlessness and civil unrest, it's never been more clear California's in a state of turmoil. And I ask my fellow Angelenos, why are Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass still in office?
Mel, any message from you to Governor Newsom or Karen Bass tonight?
Spend less on hair gel. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, what can I say to them? Not big admirer of either.
I don't like him either.
Gavin Newsom walked into the moment like a man convinced the room existed to admire him. Posture perfect, confidence rehearsed, image fully intact. Then Mel Gibson detonated it. There was no build-up, no polite sparring, no mutual respect performance. Gibson came in raw, aggressive, and unfiltered, cutting straight through Newsom's polished exterior and exposing the emptiness underneath. This wasn't a debate between equals. It was a collision between image and instinct. Newsom, the carefully styled political performer, suddenly looked unprepared when faced with someone who didn't care about optics or approval. Gibson didn't argue policy.
We deserve much more and much better, and there is absolutely no adequate excuse the governor or mayor can make for this gross mismanagement and failure to preemptively deal with what they knew was coming.
He attacked the persona, shredding the smirk, the posture, the manufactured authority, and in seconds, the illusion cracked. The California prince wasn't battling potholes or press conferences anymore. He was scrambling to defend an ego that had never been seriously challenged. California didn't elect a governor. It cast a lead actor, and Gavin Newsom has been performing ever since. Every crisis becomes a stage. Every press conference and audition. Every failure reframed as bold leadership with the right lighting and camera angle. He doesn't govern problems. He poses around them, flashing that polished grin while the state frays in real time.
And Mel Gibson had some very interesting things to say about California Governor Gavin Newsom's failure to prepare the state for these catastrophic wildfires that are ravaging LA still.
In 2019, I think Newsom said, I'm going to take care of the forests and maintain the forests and do all that kind of stuff. He didn't do anything.
Didn't do anything. And then on top of that, they cut the water off.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's all funny. And then I think all our tax dollars probably went for Gavin's hair gel. I don't know, but it's like, it's sad. It's like the place is just on fire.
While businesses flee, streets decay, and families pack up U-Hauls, Newsom stays locked on optics, refining the smirk, adjusting the stance, selling calm while chaos spreads behind him. His record isn't progress. It's a highlight reel of image management covering systemic collapse. And that's what made the clash with Mel Gibson so brutal. Gibson didn't attack policies. He attacked the performance itself. If this political takedown has you hooked, please hit that subscribe button. At some point, the performance stopped being clever and started becoming embarrassing. Gavin Newsom carries himself like a comic book hero frozen, in a permanent power pose. Flawless hair, heroic posture, endless confidence. But the substance underneath bends with the political wind. One day it's toughness, the next it's empathy, then suddenly it's vision, depending on what polls best that week. He projects strength while avoiding responsibility, confidence while dodging consequences.
How much more of their destructive decision-making masquerading as leadership are we going to tolerate? It's time to take back our community and our state and put the power and the privilege in the hands of competent leaders whose goals are to protect us and the way of life this nation was founded upon and promises to offer. That's all.
Every stumble gets reframed as progress, every failure padded with buzzwords until reality disappears under the script. Newsom doesn't respond to mistakes. He monologues through them, turning accountability into theater. And that's why the ridicule sticks. Not because critics are unfair, but because the contrast is impossible to ignore. Homelessness crisis is where the performance collapses completely, because no amount of posture or polish can hide the reality on the streets. Under Gavin Newsom, billions have been poured into programs that somehow make the problem worse, not better. Tents spread, sidewalks vanish, and entire neighborhoods rot while press releases promise progress. Newsom tours the damage like a producer scouting locations, unveiling recycled plans with fresh branding while nothing actually changes. Businesses flee, families feel unsafe, and cities like San Francisco start to resemble abandoned sets from a dystopian film. This isn't compassion failing, it's leadership refusing to confront results.
Now, a lot of people have been coming out and calling out, you know, Gavin Newsom endlessly, and the biggest one of all is Mel Gibson. We all know that he is a very big, open critic of Gavin Newsom, and he continues to actually do that, and rightfully so, because we already know that there's a lot of issues going on right now within the state of California.
Money disappears, accountability never shows up, and Gavin acts genuinely baffled that people are leaving in droves. The cruelty of it isn't neglect alone, it's denial. While Californians step over needles and human misery, their governor keeps smiling into cameras, selling empathy while the crisis metastasizes, proving that when optics replace outcomes, suffering becomes permanent. California's blackout crisis exposed the fantasy at the heart of Gavin Newsom's leadership, turning daily life into an expensive exercise in sitting quietly in the dark. Families pay some of the highest electricity rates in the country, only to watch food spoil in powerless refrigerators, while Newsom brags about green leadership that depends on importing power from other states just to survive. He sells it as progress. Everyone else sees embarrassment. Residents live like unwilling campers in a permanent emergency drill, except there's no fun, no escape, and no accountability. Then there's water, a state bordered by ocean and mountains, somehow lecturing families and farmers to ration like it's the Sahara.
Gibson lost his house in these wildfires, and what you just saw there was an effort to recall the governor and Mayor Bass. Does his star power in this matter?
It matters in the sense we're playing it now on national television on a highly rated Fox and Friends First show, and that has gone viral on social media. And meanwhile, the same day that Mel Gibson says what he says there, and he's correct on so many things as far as the management of wildfires, Gavin Newsom's approval on the handling of the wildfires is only 30%.
Wow.
Reservoirs shrink, crops fail, livelihoods collapse, and Newsom's answer is always more restrictions delivered with moral superiority. It's policy by scolding, not solving. If this were fiction, it would be dismissed as exaggerated, but it isn't. It's a government so obsessed with optics and ideology that basic infrastructure collapses while leadership insists everything is working exactly as planned. The pandemic didn't just expose bad judgment, it put Gavin Newsom's hypocrisy under stadium lighting. While millions of Californians were locked inside their homes, businesses collapsing, weddings canceled, funerals streamed on phones, and children stalled behind frozen Zoom screens, Newsom treated the rules like they were written for someone else. He lectured families about sacrifice by day, and then slipped into elite Napa dining rooms by night, sipping expensive wine while the state he governed was suffocating. This wasn't a mistake, it was entitlement caught on camera. The message was unmistakable. Obedience for you, exceptions for him.
And Governor Gavin Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass, well, they were also suggesting that LA was under control. They had it covered while, of course, LA was essentially burning. And they've been blaming Donald Trump for all the chaos in LA, while Gavin Newsom has been trying to emerge as the strong leader of the Democrats as he eyes off the presidency in 3 years' time. But actor Mel Gibson has spoken out, blasting the governor and the mayor, rightfully so, for their disastrous leadership.
And the damage didn't stop there. Schools remained shuttered long after evidence said they shouldn't, crushing students academically in a state that brags about innovation and wealth. Crime surged as enforcement softened, retailers were looted openly, and leadership waved it off as manageable. Stores closed, shelves locked behind glass, and ordinary people paid the price, while Newsom insisted everything was under control. Controlled for who? Not families, not workers, not students. The pandemic didn't just weaken California. It stripped the mask off a governor who demanded discipline from everyone except himself. Housing has become one of the clearest measures of failure under Gavin Newsom's leadership. Home ownership is out of reach for ordinary families. Rents consume entire paychecks, and young workers are forced to share small apartments well into adulthood. Despite years of promises, the state continues to fall behind on housing supply, weighed down by zoning restrictions, permitting delays, and regulatory costs that make building slow and expensive.
If I were giving the governor advice, I'd say, don't be so overt that people can see the wheels turning. the obvious question would be, well, you've been governor of California for 6 years. You were lieutenant governor for many years before that. When did you have this epiphany? Right. You know, and the answer is when he found that the Republicans could weaponize the issue.
Newsom frequently highlights affordable housing initiatives, but the results remain minimal compared to the scale of the crisis. Projects are announced, ground is broken, and press conferences are held. Yet the shortage persists and prices keep rising. As more residents leave the state in search of stability and affordability elsewhere, the gap between rhetoric and reality becomes harder to ignore. What remains is a housing market that reflects policy indecision, not progress, and a growing sense that the problem is being managed politically rather than solved practically. Beyond housing, California's broader governance under Gavin Newsom often feels driven more by image than outcomes. Major challenges, from infrastructure strain to wildfire preparedness, are routinely met with announcements and press briefings that emphasize messaging over measurable results. Wildfires have become a near-annual certainty, destroying communities and ecosystems, yet long-term prevention efforts continue to lag behind the scale of the problem. Residents brace for each season, knowing evacuation orders, power shutoffs, and property loss are no longer rare events but expected ones.
We have to do a better job. We need competent, good governance. Now, that doesn't mean you can't criticize the governor of California for, I think, some very bad decisions over a very long period of time. I mean, some of these reservoirs have been dry for 15, 20 years. The fire hydrants are being reported as going dry while the firefighters are trying to put.
Despite this, leadership responses tend to focus on framing the crisis rather than demonstrating sustained improvement. For many Californians, the frustration isn't just the disasters themselves, but the sense that lessons aren't being fully absorbed and translated into durable policy change. Over time, that gap between presentation and performance erodes trust, leaving citizens skeptical that progress is more than a talking point. Fiscal management under Gavin Newsom has raised growing concerns about sustainability and accountability. California regularly announces large budget surpluses, yet residents continue to face deteriorating infrastructure, rising crime, and declining public services. Billions are allocated, but the outcomes are often unclear, leaving taxpayers unsure where improvements are actually materializing. At the same time, ambitious environmental mandates move forward despite practical constraints, including an electrical grid that struggles to meet current demand. Policies such as aggressive vehicle bans and layered regulatory requirements may align with long-term goals.
And look at Gavin Newsom. He tried to do this, was it a radio show or podcast, whatever he tried to do. Now he's busy trolling on social media, and it's cringe, it's falling flat. I'm sure they'll come after me now, who cares? Because Donald Trump is one of one. Only he can do what he's done with social media, with podcasts, in the way he's done it. 900 rallies and counting.
But they frequently outpace the state's capacity to implement them smoothly. For many residents, the issue isn't opposition to reform. It's the disconnect between spending, promises, and tangible results. When costs rise faster than quality of life, confidence in leadership erodes, regardless of how ambitious the vision sounds on paper. For many Californians, the impact of Gavin Newsom's leadership is felt most sharply in the ordinary routines that are no longer ordinary. Fuel prices remain some of the highest in the country, turning a basic commute into a constant financial calculation for working families. While state officials often point to global markets or corporate behavior, residents see a layered system of taxes, fees, and regulations that compound costs with little short-term relief. At the same time, public safety concerns have quietly reshaped daily life. Retail theft has become common enough that locked cabinets, reduced store hours, and full closures are now routine in many neighborhoods. What once felt like isolated incidents now feel systemic, leaving people frustrated that enforcement changes were rolled out faster than the safeguards needed to prevent abuse. The gap between policy intent and lived reality has widened. Reforms are framed as progress.
Curious, we see a lot of the cities that you can't conceal carry, or it's extremely hard to get concealed carry, or California being one of them, Illinois, New York. I mean, do you think that everyday citizens carrying a gun reduces crime or increases crime?
I think the evidence
The evidence suggests the opposite. It increases the likelihood of a gun death.
Yet the immediate experience for many residents is inconvenience, insecurity, and higher costs. Over time, that erosion of everyday stability weighs more heavily than speeches or long-term promises, because quality of life isn't measured in press releases. It's measured in whether people feel safe, mobile, and financially secure in their own communities. Throughout his tenure, Gavin Newsom has positioned California as a national model on climate policy and social leadership, yet the results often reveal deep contradictions between messaging and reality. Wildfires continue to grow in scale and intensity, releasing massive amounts of pollution each year while destroying towns, livelihoods, and entire ecosystems. Despite repeated warnings and recurring disasters, long-term prevention efforts, such as forest management, infrastructure hardening, and emergency readiness, have struggled to keep pace. At the same time, residents are asked to accept higher costs and tighter restrictions in the name of environmental responsibility, even as the state relies on out-of-state power and emergency measures to function. For many Californians, the frustration isn't rooted in opposition to environmental goals.
He plays this slick little game of words. He doesn't say crime goes up, he says gun deaths go up. Why? Because that phrasing triggers your brain into thinking guns are the problem. But let's break that down. If you've got more guns in one state than the other, obviously the number of deaths involving guns is going to be higher in that state. That doesn't mean it's more dangerous. It just means the tools used are different. You know where the gun death rate is low?
But in the sense that policy priorities are communicated more effectively than they are executed. Press conferences and carefully framed statements often arrive faster than durable solutions, creating the impression that performance and presentation are taking precedence over follow-through. Over time, this pattern has fostered skepticism, as citizens question whether leadership is focused on managing optics during crises rather than preventing the next one. When all of these issues are viewed together, Gavin Newsom's record reads less like a vision for the future and more like a warning about leadership driven by image over results. California remains a state with enormous advantages: wealth, innovation, natural resources, and global influence. Yet many residents feel those strengths are being offset by rising costs, declining services, and persistent crises that never seem fully resolved. The concern for many is not ideology, but execution. Ambitious goals are announced repeatedly while core problems continue to worsen or stagnate. Over time, that gap between promise and outcome erodes trust, leaving people skeptical that new initiatives will deliver different results. Leadership is ultimately judged not by presentation or rhetoric, but by whether everyday life becomes more stable, affordable, and secure for the people living under it. For a growing number of Californians, the question is no longer about messaging or intent, but whether the state can change course before long-term damage becomes irreversible.